Baking 101. Substitutes for baking soda.
Hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Baking 101. Baking can sometimes be challenging, especially when you find yourself short of an essential ingredient like baking soda or bicarbonate of soda. But don't worry, there are a number of ingredients that you can use as a substitute. Today, we'll go through some alternatives to baking soda and how to use them in your baking.
What is baking soda?
Before we jump into the substitutes, let's first understand what baking soda is. Baking soda, also known as bicarbonate of soda, is a leavening agent used in baking. It works by reacting with acidic ingredients in your batter, creating carbon dioxide gas which causes your dough or batter to rise.
Using baking powder as a substitute.
One of the easiest and most effective substitutes for baking soda is baking powder. Baking powder is actually a combination of baking soda and an acid, typically cream of tartar, so it can perform the same function as baking soda in your recipe. To substitute, you'll need to use about 3 times the amount of baking powder. For example, if your recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of baking soda, you can replace it with 3 teaspoons of baking powder. Remember though, using more baking powder can affect the taste, so use this substitute when it won't dramatically affect the flavor of your dish.
Using potassium bicarbonate as a substitute.
If you are on a low-sodium diet, potassium bicarbonate is a great substitute for baking soda. It can be used in a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning if your recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of baking soda, you can use 1 teaspoon of potassium bicarbonate instead.
Using yeast as a substitute.
If you're making bread or rolls, and you're out of baking soda, you can use yeast as a substitute. Yeast is a living organism that feeds on the sugars in your dough, producing carbon dioxide gas just like baking soda. However, yeast works much more slowly, so you'll need to allow more time for your dough to rise. That's it for this episode of Baking 101. I hope this information is helpful and makes your baking experience a lot smoother. Remember, baking is all about understanding the science behind the ingredients, and once you do, you can create amazing and delicious dishes. So, the next time you find yourself out of baking soda, remember that baking powder, potassium bicarbonate, and yeast can save the day. Happy baking, everyone!